I'm surprised she's still alive. Jay gives a dark laugh. What? Nothing, she says. But I really wish you hadn't answered. How come? She sighs heavily. There are some people you just want to forget.
Chapter 22. Cassie. Monday night. The blue suitcase sits open on the bed as Cassie throws in crumpled t-shirts, jeans, and flimsy underthings. Her blonde wig sits on the dresser, next to the gun. She hasn't turned on a lamp. They might be watching the house, so she works in the light of the setting sun. She's already packed Rick's bag, with everything he needs, in the SUV, but she has to finish her things, too. No hose, he'd told her. Fucking ridiculous. No hose.
They're here,
Bobby says from the living room.
3 of them.
She closes the suitcase, snapping the locks, setting it on the floor.
Stay cool,
Rick barks down to her. I am cool, she mumbles. She goes to the edge of the bed, resting the gun on her thighs. She takes a deep breath, stares at the partly opened door. Even now, she didn't want to close that door. Rick told her as long as she didn't make a sound, it would be okay. Probably trying to make up for their fight. She hears footfalls from outside. A dull knocking. The front door opens and the house wheezes with the presence of new bodies. She hears the men in the living room. Mumbled voices. Thumping. Footsteps. She sits with her back straight, staring at the door, hands sweating as they grip the gun. All she hears are soft clicks of the road case being opened and the clunk of the money counter being set up. The sun sets completely, and the amber glow on the wall turns dusky blue. The bedroom is stifling on the hot summer night. The window doesn't open, and the AC hasn't worked since they got here. Her back starts to ache from sitting in the same position. How much longer would they be? A drop of sweat makes its way down her forehead, into her brow, and she wipes it with the back of her hand, careful to keep the gun away from her face. But she hears a sharp clatter, not from the living room, but from her feet. In a panic, she looks down to see a wooden bead bounce across the floor and hit the door.
Somebody back there?
A stranger's voice, deep, threatening.
Nobody,
says Rick. She hears creaking from the hallway, and Rick's voice again.
I said, nobody's there.
Her heart pounds. The footsteps get closer. She squeezes the gun handle, lifting it toward the door. Stay cool. Suddenly the world is nothing but thunder and banging. The door jolts in its frame as a ragged hole explodes in the wood. She's not fully aware of pulling the trigger, only the numbness in her shoulder from the recoil. She separates the din of her ringing eardrums from the gunshots in the living room. It feels like a war zone, bullets blasting, glass crashing, the walls vibrating. She has to get out of here. She doesn't want to die. She stumbles to the window and tries opening it, but it's just a panicked instinct. She knows it's painted shut. Another blast. Then another. Then nothing. She waits. Silence. Nothing but the smell of gun smoke hanging gray in the air. She creeps to the door and listens. After a moment, she peers out into the hall. She flinches when she sees a body on the floor in front of her, the back of his white t-shirt blooming crimson, everything else about him absolutely still. She leans out further, sees Bobby on the floor by the door, unmoving, covered in blood. Bobby is the only one who had a clear shot of the guy. He must have shot him to protect her. Fuck. She sees the lifeless, bloody hand of someone leaning across the table. But there were 3 coming. Is the other one dead, too? Or is he waiting for her? And where's Rick? Still holding the gun, warm to her touch, she creeps into the hallway, stepping over the body. She slides against the wall, the floorboards creaking as she moves toward the carnage. She smells the metallic smoke that hovers in the air, notices a fine mist of white powder settling in the light from an overturned lamp. Then she sees them. One lying face forward on the table, Bobby in front of the door, another big guy down by the wall. Rick is lifeless, too, fallen between the couch and the coffee table, his tank top and arms so covered in blood he looks splashed with red paint. She holds her breath for a moment, then feels something she wasn't expecting. Relief. The cool rush of relief. She exhales for what seems like the first time in weeks. Then she sees the money. Rolls on the coffee table splattered with blood, much more in the red duffel bag on the floor. She works so quickly she can barely see her hands moving in the dimness. She grabs all the loose cash she can and stuffs it back into the duffel, hiking it over her shoulder. It's damn heavy, but she can manage. She stumbles clumsily into the hall, nearly tripping on the body because she's afraid to look down. She hurries into the bedroom for her things. She steps over the corpse one last time. At the very last second, she remembers. Fingerprints, and turns back to wipe the bedroom doorknob with the hem of her tank top. She stumbles into the kitchen, then shoulders open the screen door. It slams behind her as she hears the first siren in the night.
Chapter 23. Beth. Tuesday evening. The main dining room of the Rosedale Park Country Club overlooks the landscaped gardens where Beth and Jay posed for their wedding pictures. She remembers feeling giddy on champagne that night, her cheeks aching from smiling, her voice hoarse from meeting Jay's family and friends. It had been so romantic. A happy new beginning for her, with a new family, a new life. But her focus shifts, and she sees her reflection in the window, like a ghost of herself, dissolving into the darkness. "So what does he do exactly, this Italian fellow?" Jay's mother asks, cutting her steak. Ellen Montgomery is in her early 60s, white hair, a Chanel suit, her perfume cloying around her in a little cloud. She switches the fork to her other hand before taking a nibble of the steak. It's an old-fashioned way to eat, not even the most cosmopolitan. But it's one of the things she liked about Jay when they first met. He had good table manners. It was a silly thing, but it said a lot about how a person was raised. "He's an investor," Jay says in the tone of voice he uses when he's trying to con somebody. Light, casual. He had a couple scotches at home, and more here, along with the wine. He's getting overconfident. "He made a fortune in real estate. Now he wants to get into the business. He's going to put up some of the money. In this case, $2 million, and that triggers the whole rest of the operation. We can start making offers, writing checks, that kind of thing." "Start?" Jay's father asks with a sarcastic laugh. John Montgomery is fit, wearing a navy suit and tie, with the same shade of white hair as his wife's, but brushed back. Beth has not seen his hair change from that stiff wave in all the time she's known him, regardless of the occasion or the weather. "How long does it take before people in your business actually start getting paid?" "It might be slow, Dad, but when it happens, it's big. And this time, it's gonna be huge." Beth sees the phony smile on her husband's face. The eagerness to please his parents is transparent, but it's an impossible task with them. She doesn't even know why he tries. "Did I tell you we're in talks with Mila Jovovich right now?" "Is she the one with the orphans?" Ellen asks. "You're thinking of Angelina Jolie." "Has she signed a contract yet?" "Dad, I said we're in talks. That means we're negotiating with her agent." "Why do you act as if negotiating is a good thing?" "Because That's the way the business works. He gives a forced laugh. Look, I'll send you the deal memo, okay? You can see what I mean. I'd love your opinion on the budget, too.
Ellen turns to Beth. Business, business, she whispers. It's always business with boys, isn't it? She taps her mouth in a mock yawn. Beth tries to smile, sipping her wine. You seem a little quiet tonight, dear. Are you feeling all right? Of course, I'm fine, thanks. At the best of times, Beth feels like an outsider with her in-laws, but she's so nervous about seeing Cassie, it's even worse tonight. She's barely been able to talk. She has no idea what to expect. Cass was always so unpredictable, always getting into trouble, getting her into trouble too. Are you sure? Absolutely. Just don't force anything, darling. If it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. It doesn't matter to us if you have children. We have plenty of... Ellen. Beth puts down her wine glass, more forcefully than she expected, and it clinks the side of her plate. Jay glances over, frowning. Why does she have to bring that up again? She did it every time they got together. Just don't worry about it, okay? I said I'm fine. We both are. Yes, of course you are. A few silent slices of Ellen's steak. The men are still talking contracts, but Jay glances over again, as if checking up on her. You know I was out with a friend the other day who went to Bryn Mawr. Didn't you go there? No, Mom, Jay says. Beth doesn't know if she's grateful or pissed off that he's been eavesdropping. She grew up in Bryn Mawr, the town. She went to college in Boston. The New England Institute of Music. Remember? He gives Beth a wink. It's the best music school in the country. What about Juilliard? His father asks. Beth tries not to roll her eyes. Every time her education comes up, Jay reminds his folks, best music school in the country, and every time one of them says, better than Juilliard? Jay is always forced to add, well, it's one of the best. That's what they told us anyway, Beth says, trying to laugh. At any rate, this friend of mine, Ellen continues, she's from Philadelphia, and she went to Bryn Mawr. Do you know her by any chance? Celia Barnes? No, I don't think so, Beth says. She doesn't know everybody, Mom. No, I suppose not. Good family. Anyway, I had lunch with her last week, and we were talking about this time I visited her for homecoming. I had to remember that little limerick, or whatever it was, for all the stops along the main line. The main line was the name for a collection of wealthy villages along the Pennsylvania Railroad that once served as grand country estates for Philadelphia's richest old money families. The stops were distanced exactly 2 minutes apart on the railroad tracks, and locals created a mnemonic device to remember all the names. What was it again? Ellen asks, squinting. Old maids never wed and... Old maids never wed and have babies, Beth says in a dull monotone. Is that why she brought it up? Beth thinks. Because it's about babies. She feels a stab in her heart, so sharp and painful it's as if Ellen leaned over the table and wedged her steak knife between Beth's ribs. Right. How does it go again? Old was for Overbrook. Maids was for Marion. Never was for Narberth. But what was... Winwood, Ardmore, Haverford, and Bryn Mawr, Beth says. Wed and have babies. Oh, that's right. I've got to tell Celia. She'll get a kick out of it. She couldn't remember it either. Almost as if Ellen is testing her, Beth goes on. Really vicious retrievers snap willingly. Pardon me? It's not finished. There are about 10 other towns. Really for Rosemont, vicious for Villanova, retrievers for Radnor. Jay and his father are looking over now. Snap for St. David's. Willingly for... Beth, Jay says with a little laugh. I think she gets it. Really?
There's a sarcastic note in Beth's voice as she regards her mother-in-law. Do you get it? Ellen just gives her a cold smile. Jay goes back to his conversation with his father, but glances over at Beth, clenching his jaw as if to say, "Take it easy." Beth sighs and looks at her watch. As nervous as she is about seeing Cass, she can't take it anymore. She needs a few minutes to decompress by herself. "I'm sorry," she says, dabbing the corners of her lips with her napkin. "I really should go." "Oh, that's right. You're meeting an old friend, are you?" "Yes, from college." Beth grabs her purse and stands up from the table. The men stand up too. Jay glares at her for leaving early, but she knows he won't make a scene. "Well, have a nice time," Ellen says. "I love that scarf, by the way. Is it new?" "Yes, it is. Thank you." Ellen places her hand next to her mouth in a mock whisper. "You might want to sneak to the ladies' room first. The tag is showing, dear." Chapter 24. Boston, 12 years ago. Cassie is wasted again. She leans on Beth's shoulder, her whole body weight pressed against Beth as they squeeze through a crowded corridor, black light making everything glow, music blaring behind them. Cassie's skirt is so short, the gauntlet of men seem not just entitled to stare, but invited to do it. They glance at Beth, too, but it makes her uncomfortable. Cassie is like a different species. She has instincts that Beth doesn't have. Even drunk out of her mind, she uses her sexuality to get attention. She leans over, yelling in Beth's ear to be heard. "I need a pit stop," she announces. "Can't you wait? We have to get back." They couldn't miss curfew again, but Cassie has already pulled away. She zigzags toward the women's washroom. Black leather skirt barely covering her ass, fishnets ripped, cleavage on display. She's a walking cliché. Beth follows her into the dank room. There's a small line of women waiting, but one stall is broken and there's no door. Cassie stumbles into the stall, lifts her skirt, drops the fishnets. Beth blocks the doorway, looking over her shoulder, giving Cass at least some privacy. There are a couple of women doing lines on the edge of the counter, others fixing their hair in front of the mirror, but nobody looks at them. Nobody cares. Cassie flushes, stands up, but she doesn't pull up her stockings. She's standing there, her pussy on display, the fishnets digging into her thighs. She had no shame in the dorm either, always walking around nude. It had taken only 2 days before Cassie confessed to wondering if she was bisexual. Now Cassie hooks her hand around the back of Beth's neck and drags her in, stopping just before their lips meet, her breath smelling like beer. Beth lurches back. "Cassie, you're drunk." "Not that drunk," she says with a laugh. It wouldn't be the last time Cassie tried to come on to her, but it never worked. Beth was perhaps the only person Cassie Ogilvy couldn't seduce. Chapter 25. Beth. Tuesday night. She pulls up outside Footsie's, a low brick building surrounded by discount stores closed for the night. A cringe works its way up her spine as she surveys the bar. It looks like just the sort of dive Cassie loved going to. Gritty, rough. The last time she'd been in a place like this was with Cassie herself. Why are her memories of that time so clear, like photographs laid out on a table? Cassie on her single bed in the dorm room, laughing. Sitting around the turquoise pool in Southampton, drinking wine. Dancing in a club, mascara smeared. Cassie with her microphone, Beth at her keyboard. Music was everywhere back then. It was how they connected, on a soul level, drawn to each other through their love of music. But this isn't good. Cassie showing up like this. What happens if she meets Jay? Beth knows she can't trust her old friend. Back in college, She seduced every guy Beth was remotely interested in. She isn't sure she can trust Jay either, not with a woman like Cass. Stop it. This is just drinks with an old friend. Cassie's probably changed, grown up a bit. She's just being paranoid. She takes a deep breath and grabs her purse. She twists the rear view to freshen her lipstick. That's when she sees the scarf around her throat and the little tag poking through the silk. She unties it and shoves it into her purse. The lighting is dim, billiard balls echoing, the smell of stale beer thick in the air. Hey, B! Beth squints in the darkness and sees a figure at a table near the back. The swing of an arm. Over here! Beth walks toward the woman with long, wild, dark hair. Something about the stubborn tilt of her head is so familiar. She'd recognize Cassie anywhere, even in silhouette. You look great, man, Cassie says, engulfing Beth in a hug. Feeling her exotic curves is like stepping back through time. She still smells the same, too, like booze and cigarettes and musky perfume. Grown-up life must agree with you. Oh, thank you, Beth says, genuinely shy. But you're the one who looks great. You haven't changed a bit. You're still gorgeous. Cassie just shrugs off the compliment. Forget it. I'm a wreck. Got up on the wrong side of the bed like 5 years ago. Haven't slept since. Beth laughs, but she's more than a little surprised her old friend looks so good, especially considering she still lived hard, judging from the smudged black eyeliner, leather jacket, and tight jeans, not to mention the empty beer bottles and shot glasses lined up on the table. But her olive skin is clear, full lips frame her perfect white teeth, and if she's gained a pound, it's in all the right places. Maybe there were a couple of new lines around her big green eyes, but no worse than Beth's. Otherwise, she seems the same, still entirely Cassie. Beth is inwardly stunned. She feels so different than she did back then. The preppy blonde with the ponytail, now a married music teacher feeling middle-aged. Sit down, Cassie says, moving a blue suitcase under the table. She shoves a red duffel bag onto the empty seat beside her and plops her big black purse, full of buckles and fringe, on top of it. She raises her hand for the waiter who heads over, thumping in combat boots. His head is shaved, his neck tattooed, gold hoops in his ears. A glass of Sauvignon Blanc, please, says Beth.
Pinot okay?
Fine. And another round for me.
Sure thing.
The waiter collects her empties and heads off. Guess no use specifying the vintage in a place like this, right? She whispers. Probably not, Beth says, laughing. The girl always did know how to make her laugh. Sorry to drag you out this way, but fucking L.A. They say you need a car, but you don't really believe it till you get here. Yes, you definitely need a car. Beth smiles, studying her old friend like a movie come to life. Despite the tension of the night and dinner and Ellen, despite everything, Beth feels more relaxed right now than she's been in months, maybe years. She remembers now why they became friends in the first place. It wasn't just that they were thrown together in that tiny dorm room. Beth had been used to new roommates. And it wasn't just that Cassie was the first person she'd ever known who loved music as much as she did, though that was part of it. What really amazed Beth was Cassie's way with people. She was so comfortable with everyone, so at ease in her own skin, treating everyone the same. Custodians, the school dean, club owners, teachers, drug dealers, waiters. She had no filters, no censors or shame. It's why she was such a brilliant performer. Beth always admired that about her. How she could truly be herself anywhere, anytime. I can't believe I found you, Cass says. I checked Facebook for you like 1,000,000 times over the years. Sorry, I never got the hang of it. She pauses, curious. So, how did you find me? I Googled you. Saw you on that school's website. Ah. Beth remembers her boss insisting they hyphenate her name. Beth Crawford Montgomery, so they could put the shot of the album cover next to her bio. But then she wonders aloud, okay, but how did you get my home number? Wasn't hard. I called that Steinberg place and conned them. I see. Beth is secretly annoyed they'd give out personal contact information, but she also knows how convincing Cassie can be. The waiter brings their drinks and the women clink, as they had countless times before. So, you decided to become a teacher, huh? Yeah, Beth says, trying to smile. Bit the bullet? I know, I said I never would, but I love it. It's a good school. Great kids. Beth has choked down the lie so many times it has somehow come to seem like the truth. So you're not playing at all anymore? Not really, no. That sucks. You should be playing. You're brilliant. The Lotus Flower was amazing, by the way. I downloaded it. You're kidding. You and about 2 other people. How did you even know about it? I told you. I look you up every now and again. Saw you released it. So what happened? Why'd you give it up? Beth stares at her a moment. What happened? What a stupid question. Nothing. That's what happened. Nothing. I had to move on. She wants to change the subject. It's too painful. Cassie wouldn't understand. She takes a sip of wine and brings lightness to her voice. So, what about you? You said you've got a gig coming up in Monterey? Even as Beth asks it, she feels a stab of envy. Naturally, Cassie's career would turn out so much better than her own. She didn't have the same fears Beth had. Beth loved and hated that about her friend since the day they met. Not a big deal, Cassie says, shrugging. Just some little dive. Fake it till you make it, right? Beth smiles at the mention of the old motto. Jay uses it too. She'd forgotten it was one of Cassie's favorites. How strange. Jay would probably love her. They'd get along. They both love drinking and partying so much. Her heart clenches as Cassie keeps talking, never at a loss for words. This friend of mine's picking me up. We're gonna head out tonight, get some rehearsing done. It's been a while. She touches her throat and makes an off-key sound. She should be here any minute. I can't wait for you to meet her. I've told her all about you. That's sweet. Beth doesn't know if she's relieved or disappointed that they were being joined by someone. So, what about you? How are you doing? I'm great. No, I mean, really. How are you feeling? Beth reaches out, almost putting her hand on Cassie's, but stopping at the last moment. You mean, am I taking my meds? She widens her eyes dramatically. Don't put it like that. It's what you meant, right? I just care about you, Cass, that's all. I just want to make sure you're okay. Of course. Don't I look okay? My insurance ran out, so I'm self-medicating now. Otherwise, it's all good. You're not. Beth fears the worst. Heroin, opioids, meth. Not the hard stuff. Cassie laughs, holding up her drink. I'm too old for that shit. And too smart. Look, I'm fine. Seriously. How about you? You got married, I see. Yeah, almost 3 years ago now. Noticed I didn't get an invitation to the wedding. She grins, teasing. I would have loved to invite you, but it was just family. Very small. Any kids? Beth refrains from touching her stomach, a dead giveaway. No, not yet. You? Cassie almost chokes on her beer. God, no. And Beth envies her loose attachment to family. Hooked up with a roadie for a while, but it's over. Nasty dude. Beth knows that when Cassie Ogilvy called someone a nasty dude, you could believe her. You always did like roadies. What can I say? I have a soft spot for stoners with great arms and tattoos. Who else do you meet playing bars anyway? Or street corners? No, Beth gasps. Kidding. About the street corners, anyway. She raps the wooden table. Listen, I should call Lily, find out what's up. She should be here by now. Where are the phones around here? She twists in her seat. I lost my damn cell. Here, use mine. Beth reaches in her purse for her phone. She can't help but offer her friend a favor. Thanks, man. Cassie gets out her wallet, messy and overstuffed as it always was. Pictures, receipts, and scraps of paper spill out. As she rifles through the mess, Beth notices her wrists are still layered with mismatched bracelets, some of them familiar from the old days. Beneath the leather, the silver, and beads, she catches a glimpse of the faint slashes on Cassie's wrists. The scars aren't as clear as they were when the girls were in college, pale ghosts of themselves. If Beth didn't know what to look for, she may never have seen them. But like all bad memories, they would never fade completely. Remember that? Cassie tosses a photo to her. Beth picks it up and sees the two of them standing outside the big white summer house. The ache in her heart is palpable. She'd forgotten they all took pictures that day. Meanwhile, Cassie finds a chit of paper and taps the screen. She blocks one ear as she speaks. Lily? Hey, it's me. Where are you? Why is it so loud? The shot is of Beth and Cassie, standing with their arms around each other. Cassie's in a scruffy t-shirt and shredded jeans, that familiar old knapsack on the ground at her feet. Beth wears a crisp yellow blouse and white shorts, her hair in a ponytail. The girls looked so different from each other, even back then. She thought that day would be the last time she saw her old friend. No, I checked out already. Really? Her friend's voice fades as the image pulls Beth into its own world, away from the sound of pool tables and clanking beer bottles. Instead, she hears the breakers pounding on the beach outside, the ocean so rough they couldn't even swim without getting sand thrown into their faces from the waves. She hears the rising notes of her own fingers on the keyboard of the grand piano in the conservatory, can even smell the lawn and the sea and lemon oil on antiques. These were memories she'd been afraid to relive for years, yet here they all were. She remembers those long summer nights in the big yellow bedroom overlooking the ocean, while she and Cass drank and smoked and talked about their music careers. It was so different from her bedroom in Bryn Mawr, with its shelves full of untouched collectible dolls. She was allowed to play with them if she wanted to, but she never did. She never even took them out of their boxes. They were for looking at and keeping safe. But life was different at the summer house. Instead of plastic dolls in their packages, the shelves were crammed with old, musty-smelling stuffed animals, some missing eyeballs or tails, leaning this way and that as if they were all drunk the way the girls were that summer. Beth had never drunk so much as she did that year with Cass. Cassie was always the one to instigate things, dragging the madness long into the night, until the clubs closed or Beth was so tired she insisted they go home. Cass was usually hungover in the morning, sleeping past noon most days. But Beth had always been an early riser, so there'd be long, quiet talks in the kitchen before Cass woke up. You've got to expect some problems that way, Beth. Growing up in foster care presents a lot of challenges, especially if there's been some form of abuse. It's heartbreaking, really. Beth looks over at her old friend, still on the phone. That crooked smile, that wild hair, and she's surprised by the fondness she feels. Nah, really, Lil. No problem. Yeah, okay. See you then. For sure. Love you too. She hangs up and looks over at Beth. Shit. Now she can't make it till Friday. Beth feels pressure in her throat. Don't say it. Don't say it. But she feels trapped. You have a place to stay until then? Cassie gives a little shrug. I'll think of something. I always do.
Chapter 26. Rick. Tuesday night. The only light in the dingy motel room is the shifting haze of the television. Rick sits propped up in bed, breathing heavily, trying to ignore the searing pain radiating from his shoulder. He takes a swig from the whiskey bottle. The motel room is fetid with the smell of mildew and dust, and something else, a sickly smell. He knows it's coming from the wounds, 2 of them, straight into his left shoulder, red veins mapping outward, blood and pus oozing around the dressing. He knew gauze wouldn't stanch the bleeding. He'd gone through this before, years ago, so he bought gel patches instead and taped gauze over them. But even with the air conditioning on, he's sweating and jittery, his head pounding. Were the wounds getting infected? Must be. He knows he should get to a hospital, but he can barely get out of bed. The cops would be on him within minutes anyway, especially now that a narc was killed. He grits his teeth, riding out the rage. How could he be so stupid, letting himself get set up like that? It's been 24 hours since the bloodbath, and the story has moved farther down into the newscast. Without any breaks in the case, the world has new catastrophes to consider. A terrible accident on a freeway, a missing child, a suspected gang member shot in his car. But he can't move on so easily. He needs that money. He has to find Cassie. She must know he's alive. Why isn't she looking for him? She has the number for the burner phone he's using. Why hasn't she called? He tries to focus on every detail after the shooting. He remembers hearing the back door slam at the house, sounding like another gunshot. It took a moment before he realized where he was. The back of his head seared with pain, and he thought he'd taken a bullet there, too. But it was just a large, sore lump, not even bleeding. He must have been thrown back into the wall after the first shot and gotten knocked out. Then he heard sirens approaching, distant but getting closer. He struggled to his feet, his shoulder and chest aching so badly he could barely breathe. He saw Jules hunched over the table, Bobby down by the door, the guy with the goatee on the other side of the room. Butler. He was the narc. Rick saw his picture on the news. He remembers glancing around for the red duffel bag, but the money was gone. He grabbed as much of the junk as he could, dragging the black case with his good arm. There was another body in the hallway outside the bedroom, a bullet hole in the door. Worried about Cassie, he checked the room, but it was empty. He ripped the top sheet off the bed and held it against the blood oozing from his shoulder. He limped into the kitchen, pushed open the screen door. "Cass," he hissed into the night. She'd been angry at him after their argument. Maybe she was hiding somewhere. "Cass!" But there was no sign of her. By the time he stumbled to the black SUV parked in an alley behind the yard, the sirens were right out front, car doors slamming. He pulled away into the darkness and spent the next 2 hours scouring the streets for her. He wasn't worried about the car being identified. An uncle of Bobby's had died recently and left the car to him in the will. As long as they didn't get stopped for a busted taillight or speeding, and the cops learned that Bobby hadn't changed the registration yet, they'd be fine. He was more concerned about Cass. He kept checking his phone, expecting her to call, but she didn't. He'd been bleeding so badly he had to stop at an all-night drugstore for first aid supplies, covering the stains by slinging his denim jacket over his shoulder. After that, he needed a place to stay. 2 motel managers had turned him away because he didn't have a credit card. But the third place, a run-down, sun-baked dump called the Seahorse Motel, accepted a cash deposit. Thank God he had enough for that. When he let himself into the dingy room, the first thing he did was turn on the news. The next, he finished half a bottle of whiskey. Then he tended to his wounds. He was numb with shock. The only way he knew one of the bullets had gone right through him was the bloodstain above his shoulder blade when he turned around to check. He could see the slug of the other one, so he dug it out with trembling fingers and his pocket knife, then bandaged himself up. He was even lucid enough to be able to track down that friend of hers, the one who played the piano. "Is Cassie there?" "Who?" She sounded so shocked and confused, as if she'd never even known a person named Cassie. He wonders if Cassie lied about that, too. Then he got drunk, waiting for her to call. "Are you okay, baby? Where are you? I've got the money." But his phone was silent. Cassie's phone was useless, too, without its SIM card. But at least he'd been able to find her friend. He didn't have her home address yet, but it was only a matter of time. He woke early the next morning, was able to move around and do everything he had to. Shave, change his hair. He'd even been able to leave the motel and function for a couple of hours. But he must have been running on adrenaline, because the pain is much worse now than it was earlier in the day. Much worse. It feels like a really bad flu settling in. Day 1, you feel like shit, but you can deal with it. Day 2, you feel like you're going to die. By day 3, you actually want to. The room starts to spin. He feels nauseous. He slams the bottle down and stumbles to the dingy bathroom, throwing up. Fuck. He grabs a towel, wipes his face. His head pounds and there's a ringing in his ears. A concussion, maybe, from his head hitting the wall? He got concussed after a fight a few years ago. It felt like this. There is one blessing to the pain. It takes the edge off his rage. Because every time he thinks of Cassie running out on him, his blood starts pumping and he has to force himself to breathe deeply, trying to relax. He stumbles to the nightstand, grabbing a small vial, digging white powder out with his yellowed pinky nail. He snorts it, lies down, and waits for the ache to subside, the room to stop spinning. He can't stay here much longer. There are probably 3 bounties on his head right now. One from the cops, one from Jules's posse, and one from his supplier in Florida. What if they think he set them up and took the money himself? Betrayal was the worst crime in this business. It didn't stem from any kind of honor. It was all about optics. He owed them money for the deal, $250 grand. How would it look if they let it go? They couldn't, and they wouldn't. He needs to get that money back. He has to find Cass, or they'll both be dead.
Chapter 27. Jay. Tuesday night. Jay is at the fridge, wearing his robe, drinking orange juice from the carton, when Beth and Cassie stumble in the door, shoes and luggage thumping. The clock on the wall reads 1:35 a.m. He's surprised. Beth hasn't been up past midnight in a year. He wears boxers, but the robe hangs open, and he quickly yanks it closed, not expecting company. Beth didn't even text she was bringing anyone home. The girl hangs off Beth's shoulder, her hair disheveled, her makeup smeared. She's exotically beautiful, everything oversized and lush. Eyes, lips, breasts. She can't possibly be wearing a bra, he thinks, as she stumbles and laughs, a tight t-shirt visible beneath her black leather jacket, her jeans faded and frayed. Jay just can't picture Beth hanging out with a chick like this. Yet here they were, together again. "Jay, I'd like you to meet my old friend, Cassie Ogilvy." Jay extends his hand, and it takes a moment for Cassie to focus on it. When she does, her skin is soft and so warm it's almost fiery. "Nice to meet you," she hiccups. "You too." And because it's been on his mind all night, he asks right away, "Any relation to the ad people?" Cassie just burps, her eyes hooded and dazed. "She can't get any money for your film, if that's what you mean," says Beth. Jay feels a jerk of anger. That's a shitty thing to say, he snaps. 3 hours with an old friend, and she's already giving him attitude? "I'm just kidding. Help her with the luggage." Jay grabs the suitcase, but Cassie keeps the red duffel clutched close to her. "Thanks, man," she says, slurring. "You're a real gentleman." They all tumble out of the room. The extra bedroom is at the end of the hall. It's messy and mismatched, with a basket of clean laundry on the single bed. Ever since he gave up the office last year, Jay's been working out of this cluttered space. The desk lamp is on, papers scattered about, his laptop open, an old printer set up. As Cassie stumbles into the room, she bumps the chair and the desk rattles. "Careful," he says, annoyed. "Hold on to her for a sec." Beth eases her friend toward him. Jay feels her weight and the softness of her curves, so different from the slim, narrow frame of his wife. "Hope you don't mind the mess, Cass," Beth says, grabbing the laundry, setting it aside. The moment the mattress is clear, Cassie pulls away from Jay and flops face forward into bed. Doesn't look like she minds anything right now. Beth laughs softly. She won't care. She was never a clean freak to begin with. Beth bends down to pull off the girl's beat-up black boots. Jay notices how natural it looks, as if she's done it 100 times. How strange. Beth usually wasn't so loving or maternal. "How long is she staying for?" he asks. He's bitter about the interruption, despite how hot she is. "Just until Friday." Beth tries to pull the blanket out from under her, but she won't budge. "Are you kidding? Friday? But all my stuff's in here, and I have a big meeting tomorrow." "Seems like you have a lot of big meetings lately," she says. "Yeah? So?" What's she implying? That things aren't moving fast enough on the film? He's frustrated too, but does she have to bring it up? "So get it, Jay," she says. "Just be quiet, and leave the door open a bit." "Why?" But Beth tiptoes out of the room without answering. Jay huffs, irritated. House guests weren't supposed to just drop in like this. For days at a time? How inconsiderate. Who was this chick, anyway? Why did Beth suddenly act so friendly? He'd never even heard her mention a Cassie before. This is all so unlike her. He goes to the desk, grumbling, gathering up his things. He closes the laptop and grabs his papers. He resents being inconvenienced the night before a big meeting. She'll be here tomorrow, too, when he's getting ready. It'll throw off his energy. He's used to having the house to himself during the day. Is Beth going to take off work to keep her company? Or just leave him here alone with her? A stranger? It didn't make any sense. What is he supposed to do with her all day? He turns off the lamp. The room goes dark. He's just about to leave when he hears rustling on the bed. He freezes. Light from the window shines in, illuminating Cassie in a silver-blue pool. She's on her stomach, but she's pushed herself up on her elbows. She struggles for the edge of her t-shirt, trying to pull it off. She makes helpless little moaning noises. Jay doesn't know if he should help her or get the hell out of the room. Instead, he watches in the darkness, holding his breath. Cassie squirms on the single bed, awkwardly pulling up the edge of her tee, revealing her bare back and the tan lines of a bikini top across her skin. Jay feels strangely proud that he'd guessed right. She isn't wearing a bra. She twists in bed to pull the shirt over her head, turning toward him, and as she does, he sees her breasts, firm and round, candy pink nipples going hard from the friction. Good Christ. He feels a tingling rush, but then she flops forward again, on her stomach, arms limp, her hair falling across her face. He lets out a long breath and shakes his head. He tiptoes out of the room, about to close the door, then remembers to leave it open a bit. He has to stand in the hall a moment, composing himself as a shiver works through his body. He hears Beth shuffling around in their bedroom and goes to the doorway. She's in her blue nightie, pulling decorative pillows off the bed, piling them on a chair. Why does she have to stay here? She's broke, Jay. She can't even afford a hotel. And that's our problem? She's a friend, okay? And I owe her. It's only for a few nights. She's got to be in Monterey for the weekend. She stops for a moment, regarding him. Just be careful with her. She has... Beth searches for the word. Issues. Issues? What do you mean? Not tonight. I can't get into it. Just be careful with her. That's all. Don't worry. I plan on it. He watches her climb under the duvet, pulling it around her shoulders. You're not going to read? He's used to seeing his wife tuck in every night with one of her romance novels. To look at her, you'd think she'd have her nose in Tolstoy or some other classic all the time, but she always said she needed the happy endings in romances. I'm too exhausted, she says, yawning, reaching up for the light. You coming to bed? There's no hint of invitation in her voice. Got work to do. Okay, good night. She turns off the lamp and the room sinks into darkness. The same streetlight that illuminated her friend's bare breasts only moments ago now shines on the shoulder of his wife's blue nightgown.
Chapter 28. Beth. Tuesday night. Beth lies in the darkness, staring at the surface of the nightsand. She didn't want Cassie seeing that old photo, so she's put it away, hidden it in the drawer. It seems strange to want to hide things from Cass. They shared all their secrets in school. She remembers those nights with Cassie in the dorm room, their beds barely 4 feet apart. Everything they talked about, their dreams, their fears, their failed relationships. Night after night. They came from such different backgrounds, it was hard to believe they could ever be such good friends. You're a damn prodigy, Cassie said after she heard one of Beth's exam recitals. Come play with me at Wally's. Beth's heart clamped with panic. She loved to play, but an audience terrified her. Her stage fright had almost prevented her from auditioning for the school. Cassie, on the other hand, was one of the few freshmen who were talented and gutsy enough to get paying gigs on the weekends. Beth admired and envied her for that. You're wasting your time on these teachers, Bea. You gotta get out there. You gotta play in front of people. There's this quote I love, something about talent and happiness. She snaps her fingers, trying to think of it. I can't quite... The person born with a talent they are meant to use will find their greatest happiness in using it, said Beth quietly. It's Goethe. I should have known you heard it before, Cassie laughed. Except we should put chick in there, right? We should, said Beth with a smile. Late the next night, she got a call from the manager of the bar where Cassie performed. Voices and music were so loud in the background she could barely hear, but it seemed Cass needed her. It was a 15-minute walk to the bar, but Beth ran it in half the time, squeezing around students on the sidewalk. Out of breath, she ducked into a street-level pub with a black sign above the door. Wally's Cafe, established 1947. The small room was crowded, with a bar along one side, air ducts in the low ceiling. The cramped stage at the back was empty, and the stereo played canned jazz. The clientele was mixed, black and white, young and old. The bartender recognized her. This wasn't the first time she'd had to rescue Cass, and pointed to the end of the bar. Beth pushed through the crowd to find Cassie with her head down on the counter, a cluster of men surrounding her. "Cass," she said, shaking the girl's shoulder. "Hey, Bea," Cass growled, looking up. Beth glanced at the men. "Would you excuse us for a sec?" They seemed disappointed at the interruption as she turned Cass on the stool, staring into her bloodshot eyes. "What happened to Alex?" "Screw him," she said, flapping her hand. "Second time he ditched me. That's it for that prick." "But you can't skip tonight, Cass. They probably won't have you back. Are you able to go up there now?" Beth was dubious, but she had to ask. "Yeah," Cass said, a playful smile on her lips. "If you come with me." "Oh, for Christ's sakes. You planned this, didn't you?" "I'll never tell," she said, grinning. She finished the beer with a gulp and rolled off the stool with more finesse than Beth would have given her credit for. "Don't do this," Beth hissed at her. "Don't." "The show must go on," Cassie said with a grin. She walked to the middle of the small stage area, grabbed the mic from the stand, and faced the crowd. The canned music turned down. A smattering of applause grew louder, and a few of the customers whistled. Cassie Ogilvy was a popular draw at the club. Young as she was beautiful, talented, and sexy as hell. She seemed like a star in the making. "I'd like you all to meet a good friend of mine tonight," Cass began. Beth felt the ground warp beneath her feet. A wash of sound reverberated in her ears, making Cassie's voice seem distant and unreal. "She's going to accompany me on the ivories." A few more whistles and cheers filled the room, taunting Beth. "She's a really talented musician, and my BFF. Ladies and gentlemen, Beth Crawford." The walls throbbed and colors blurred. Beth felt pressure, like an undertow in the ocean, lifting her up and pressing her down at the same time. There was applause. She could hear the wash of it beneath the pounding in her head. "I'm gonna kill you for this," she hissed as she passed her friend. Cassie's laugh rang over the microphone. It was amazing how lucid she suddenly seemed. But Cassie had a gear meant just for performing. A real pro. Beth sat down at the keyboard, her legs shaking, her hands sweating. Haydn got stage fright. Chopin. She put her fingers on the black and white keys. It was just a battered old upright, with sheet music already laid out, and a set list with Cassie's scribbles. Stormy weather, ain't misbehavin', summertime. Beth first thought Cass would prefer rock or pop music, with her black eyeliner and wild hair, but jazz was her forte, throaty, sexy, and layered. Barbra Streisand got stage fright. And Adele. Cassie counted her in with nods of her head. Beth focused, taking a deep breath. She started to play the opening bars of the first song, her fingers trembling on the keys. "Slow it down," Cassie whispered, leaning into her, putting a hand on Beth's shoulder. Beth took the pace down a bit. The direction helped her focus. Cassie's throaty voice filled the room, sultry and magnetic. Stormy weather, nearly 100 years old, felt contemporary and strangely alive. It lived in Beth's fingers. It breathed there, seeping out of the keys into the ether. Or was it out of the ether into the keys? She wasn't sure. But it was another force communicating through her, melding with everyone in the room. The jazz standard felt simplistic compared with the classical music Beth preferred, but she appreciated its purity, and Cassie was a gifted performer, enough to make you forget everything, including stage fright. The further she got into the song, the more she found her rhythm fusing with that of her friend. The keys seemed to vibrate beneath her fingers, almost lifting up to meet her. With the red exit light glowing from the back of the room, the two freshmen from the New England Institute of Music mesmerized the audience that night, and Beth's whole world changed. She realized she could perform in front of a crowd if she had